One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Those were the words of Neil Armstrong, the first man to set foot on the moon, a feat NASA and the United States achieved in 1969, that is over 50 years ago. So why are they going back to the moon again? Why would NASA repeat what it already achieved half a century ago? That is the big question on everyone's minds. We will tell you all about it. First, let me tell you about the mission. The Artemis program is NASA's plan to return human beings to the moon. Between 1969 and 1972, 12 men walked on the moon. The goal of Artemis is to put the first woman and person of color on the lunar surface. The first test flight of an uncrewed Artemis was to take off on Monday. The launch was then called off by NASA after an engine bleed problem could not be rectified. In focus is the Space Launch System, or the SLS, the biggest rocket ever developed by NASA. Controllers struggled to get an engine on the vehicle to its correct operation temperature. NASA has the option to try again on Friday. This is if the engine issue can be resolved easily. But it is possible that the rocket could need more work, and then the launch could be pushed back further into September. The name was chosen to echo that of the Apollo program. Artemis, in Greek mythology, was the twin sister of Apollo. She is also a goddess associated with the moon. Artemis I is a test flight. It includes the 322-foot Space Launch System rocket and the Orion crew capsule that sits on top. Orion's journey will last 42 days, and in this time, it will travel to the moon, loop around it, and return to Earth, splashing down in the Pacific Ocean, traveling a total distance of 2.1 million kilometers. And the passenger list does not include any human beings, but that does not mean it does not have any passengers. There are 3 mannequins and a plush Snoopy toy that will ride in Orion. Does that sound bizarre to you? Well, we thought so as well, but each crew member here serves a very special purpose. In fact, Snoopy is the zero gravity indicator. He will float inside the capsule once it reaches space. And the mannequins also have an important task. They will measure deep space radiation that future crews may experience. The NASA mission will also carry a voice assistant to the moon, an Alexa-enabled assistant named Callisto. It would change the way astronauts interact with their spacecraft. The Artemis I is just the first part of the program, and then there is the Artemis II, planned for 2024, a crewed flight that will orbit the moon but not land on it, and that will bring us to the final Artemis III, the first mission to put astronauts on the moon since Apollo 17. NASA will land a crewed spacecraft on the moon again, but this time near the southern pole. The Artemis III is scheduled for 2025, but it may not take place until 2026. Which brings us to the question that I asked you right in the beginning. Why is NASA going back to the moon? The ultimate objective of the Artemis program is what NASA calls the next giant leap, the human exploration of Mars. And this is the first step to a new future of space exploration. They want to go to the red planet, but want to be prepared as well. But the Artemis missions are not just any other do-over. It involves establishing a sustained human presence on the moon. And not just that, NASA plans to put an orbiting lunar outpost called the Gateway in place. But NASA is not the only one interested in the moon again. In 2019, a Chinese rover landed on the far side of the moon. That was the first for any country. And China is now planning a mission to the moon's south pole. The final plan, however, is an eventual lunar base. So clearly, the United States has competition, and this time the stakes are much higher. The US is not competing against China. It is fighting against time as well. The Artemis program is already years late and billions over budget. The Space Launch System and Orion were developed for over a decade. It has cost over $20 billion by now, and the spiraling costs and long gaps between the missions will make a comeback tough, especially if things end up going south with Artemis I. And going straight across now to Dr. Amitabh Ghosh with us from Pune. He is a space scientist who has been working on the NASA Mars mission since 1997. Good to have you on the broadcast. Thanks very much for being here with us. The Artemis I mission has been postponed for now following that malfunctioning issue with the engine. If you can explain to us what we know so far and how likely is a reattempt to take place on Friday.
So you have inside the launch vehicle, you have hydrogen and oxygen at a certain temperature. And it's very important to maintain those temperatures. So I think there was an issue with the temperature of the hydrogen inside the engines. And so this is a minor problem, but can become a huge problem once it's on flight. I think this is potentially a minor issue and it can be fixed. But having said that, see, the whole reason, this is not a catastrophic situation by any measure. This is just what is expected of a very large, complex system. And as you mentioned, there are no humans here. So we are here to make all the mistakes possible and kind of troubleshoot the mistakes. So when we actually fly with humans, it's safe. So everything that you're seeing happening, maybe it is going to, some other issue might crop up, but that's all very good because we want all the problems to happen now rather than with a human. So everything is on track. The cost overruns that you mentioned, any large project like the space telescope that was launched recently, right? That was massively overrun. The Mars rover budgets were exceeded. So where the developmental trajectory is not certain, there is bound to be overrun. So that is not a thing. But the biggest takeaway news here is, see, I was born in the 70s and, people thought, well, in the 60s, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, etc., everybody landed on the moon. And so the next 50 years, we're going to head to Mars. And well, that kind of did not happen. So we were headed to the space station, which is just 200 miles about from the Earth's surface. The moon is, for context, 0.4 million miles. Mars is more than 300 million miles. So now we are about to cross that boundary. And the capability, why is NASA doing this now again? Because they want to, instead of going to the International Space Station all the time, they want to now go visit the moon every couple of years, or try a trip to Mars. So it's sort of a grand plan. It's kind of a generational change, you can say, of how spaceflight is going to evolve in the next 30 years.
Right. If you can just elaborate on that point, because the question that comes up time and again is why is NASA going back to the moon? Explain to us in greater detail the significance of this mission overall, especially when it comes to the human exploration of the red planet.
Right. So imagine we went to the moon, right, in 1969. So what was the next logical step? We would go to Mars, or we would keep going back to the moon. We would set up a base. None of that happened. So there was a whole lot of reasons as to economic, political, as to why it didn't happen. But now we're all set to resume our journey back to the moon. And when you talk of the red planet, I would not completely think that Artemis might do it. So Artemis is constrained by budget because a flight is $2 billion. It is like this. Say, I'll give you an example. Say you used to travel from Delhi to New York, and then suddenly you stopped traveling from Delhi to New York, and for 30 years, 50 years, there was no flights. And then you resume flying Delhi to New York. But here, what Artemis is, it is not a reusable vehicle. So every time you're flying, you're destroying that spacecraft and you have to build it new. What is very interesting is Elon Musk is building the Starship, and that is reusable. And so what Elon Musk will do couple of 6 months down the road or to that order, he will do the same mission, go around fly around the moon and come back, but he's going to be 1,000 times cheaper. So now that changes the game completely. So where whereas Artemis requires maybe $1 billion to go to the moon, the Starship is going to require maybe 10 million. So that changes the equation completely. So it's regardless of whether Artemis or Starship is the future, we are entering a very different era of space travel.
Right. Dr. Ghosh, we're leaving it there on that. Thanks very much for being here.
Thank you.
WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.